All right, so I've been doing a little update on like the Russia-Ukraine stuff every week, so I'm gonna keep doing it. Russia got absolutely destroyed last weekend and this week by like a Ukrainian offensive. They took back a bunch of territory. Russia's looking like just a guy who started a fight and then got karate kicked so hard he doesn't know what year it is. U.S. military intelligence says Putin unable to attain Ukraine goal. Russia planned for an occupation, not necessarily an invasion, and that has set him back, Pentagon officials say. I think Putin has a lot of yes men around him because people who tell him no tend to fall out of buildings. Weird how that works. Either way, I think he has a lot of yes men around him, and I think he genuinely thought that when he walked into Ukraine, the people would be walking out arms wide open saying, wow, thank you so much. That's obviously the exact opposite of what has happened, and on top of that, I don't think he thought the military corruption was as bad as it is and all the equipment doesn't work. I think he thought he was in a different situation, and at this point, it's taken them forever to get the land that they did have. That's been taken back by the Ukrainian offensive in what? Them already on the ropes, bringing tanks from the 60s to the front line, are magically gonna have a counteroffensive and take all of Ukraine? To say that the goal of taking over Ukraine is unattainable, I feel like it is speaking short of it. But that being said, if there's one thing we know about Putin, it's that he's a petty man. So if he can't have Ukraine, maybe it's going to be a situation of heavy artillery strikes or who knows what else. Because he seems like the type of man that does not want to admit defeat under any circumstance, which is not good when you have the button to push. Setbacks for Russian forces and stretched resources in Ukraine show that Moscow's forces are incapable of achieving the goal of capturing Ukraine as things stand now, the Pentagon's intelligence chief has said. We're coming to a point now where I think Putin is going to have to revise what his objectives are for the operation. Lieutenant General Scott Barrier, director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, told a conference on Friday. It must be really hard to be the guy that's always banging your chest saying that your military's awesome and you're so tough and no one can mess with you, and then you invade a country and it goes the exact opposite of how you need it to maintain that image. You know, back home, he's like, I'm still tough, right? I'm still tough. And everyone's like, dude, Vladimir, you're the toughest. You're the most tough guy. You're number one tougher. I think the goal of capturing all of Ukraine was always outrageous, especially if it's a special military operation, not a war, and you're not gonna mobilize everyone. They're really trying to drum up troops. I saw something that they're paying people $2,700 to join and go to Ukraine. And with the way that they're being destroyed, for lack of a better word, you think they would kick up the bonus. You're telling me I have to go to an active war zone, and not one where we're winning, one where we're losing, and you're gonna give me $2,700? I'm not saying that's not a lot of money, it's just not worth the risk that I'm putting up with to actually go do that. Some people out there right now are like, no bro, that's worth it. You're crazy, bro. That's what I have to say to that, to be honest. This war has also really showcased how much something like a drone can put giant dents in an organized army. The amount of tanks that have been taken out because of a drone is nuts. And when you start thinking about the cost breakdown, okay, you have one guy flying a $2,000 drone, dropping a $500 bomb to destroy a $2 million tank, and then your armored divisions don't have enough to operate efficiently. It's a pretty good trade-off. War has just changed. I think the way that the Soviet era machine was working is not going to work in a modern conflict. I think they thought they were going to roll into Kyiv and be welcomed like heroes, but shocker, people don't like to be conquered. Yep, that's right. I've got no beef with Canada, but if they invaded tomorrow, I would be very upset. It's pretty clear right now that he's not going to be able to do what he initially intended to do. Russian forces have suffered major setbacks since the launch last week of a Ukrainian counteroffensive, which has forced Moscow's troops back from large swaths of Ukraine's northeast. The Russians planned for an occupation, not an invasion, and that has set them back, citing Putin's reluctance so far to fully mobilize Russian forces to get more manpower into the fight. Obviously, the Department of Defense of the United States, their vested interest lies in Ukraine beating Russia. But what else has been really weird? So Russian state media, because it's it's basically a dictatorship, let's be honest. always was really, really supportive of the government. They've always been like, dude, I think Putin is basically Kim Jong-un, except he does poop. That's the only difference. They would talk about how Russia's the strongest country ever. They can take on America in a war, no problem. Like, they've been hyping up this entire special operation, saying that it's going to be easy for a country as strong as Russia to go in and destroy Ukraine. And for the first time, as long as I've been aware of Russian state TV and Russian propaganda, they've been really critical of the Kremlin, saying that this is embarrassing, they need to fully mobilize, they need to up the intensity, which is not the thing you want to happen. You don't want them to start trying harder and like really shelling places and whatnot, but that's what a lot of them are calling for. They're straight up saying that the Kremlin is embarrassing and that they need to figure it out because they're losing. And when a country like Russia has people on state TV admitting that they're losing, that's a big deal because places like that do not really do well when people start speaking out. And usually the people that speak out end up disappearing relatively quickly. But I've seen a lot of people on the state television talking about how they can't win in Ukraine. They need to totally rethink their strategy. The Kremlin leadership is failing. And 9 times out of 10, all they do on this show is just say, the Russian government is the greatest thing to ever exist. They're so smart. It's incredible. So it's been a weird shift this last week, especially because the counteroffensive that Ukraine launched was so effective. CIA Deputy Director David Cohen said that Putin's risk appetite should not be underestimated. I don't think we should underestimate Putin's adherence to his original agenda, which was to control Ukraine. I don't think we've seen any reason to believe he's moved off that. Separately, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Uzbekistan on Friday, Putin promised to press ahead with his attack on Ukraine and warned that Moscow could ramp up strikes on the country's infrastructure if Ukrainian forces target facilities in Russia. Putin said the liberation of Ukraine's entire eastern Donbass region was Russia's main military goal, and he saw no need to revise it. Well, I think even that eastern region is a little bit of a walk back of them saying they were going to march into Kyiv within like 2 days. And I think what's really happening here is Putin can't win, but I don't think he's going to admit that he can't win. I think the CIA director here has a point. He's probably just going to start leveling things with artillery. For those of you that are like into history nerds, the Second Chechenian War, he kind of leveled this city called Grozny. Leveled it with artillery, like real bad. And ever since, it's kind of been the standard. They just level stuff. They haven't been doing that a ton in Ukraine because if you want to take over a country and add it to yours and have the people support you, you can't blow up everything important. But the more they lose and the more they get embarrassed, the more potential there is for Putin to kind of start upping that threshold because he's embarrassed. And that would really suck. Like, that's not something you want, especially because Russia probably does have chemical weapons they could use. Should they? No. And if they did, it would be big, big trouble. But if Putin gets embarrassed enough, I think he's probably crazy enough to do some crazy stuff we've never seen before. I don't know if he would nuke, but if there is a guy who's got his finger on the button that's like closest to pressing it right now, it is probably him. I don't think Ukraine should give up. The counteroffensive has been insane. They're making further and further pushes every day, and the Russian military is just kind of falling apart. But I do think Putin probably does try to make like a counteroffensive or something happen to stop the speed of them gaining territory. I think that's a given. So we'll keep it updated for like next week.